So the message of today is resurrection. In Latin, resurrection means to rise again. And I was thinking if we could hear the song of spring. I've been walking through the park every day and it's so incredible and stunning, unless you have allergies, right? But even so, it's pretty amazing and beautiful. And I feel like if we could hear the symphony of all these things blooming like a symphony, the song would say, the words would say, I am the resurrection and the life. I am the resurrection and the life. I am the resurrection and the life in every blooming flower, in every greening tree, in every beautiful flowing river. I am the resurrection and the life. That's what it's saying. The source of life, with a capital L, is filling my body and my mind and your body and your mind right now with an urging, an urging towards greater expression, an urging towards greater exploration, greater understanding, greater possibility. And it's like that, the way that a blade of grass pushes up in the crack of a sidewalk, or when you're hiking way up high in the highlands and you see a tree that's kind of growing out sideways through a crack in a granite rock, and you just kind of can't believe this impetus of life, the way that life is so persistent. It's so persistent. When Jesus said, I am the resurrection and the life, he was expressing his identification with that unlimited divine nature. A consciousness not limited to one body, but identified with the animating life in all bodies, in all that is, right? And it's a mystery to know what really happened to his physical body. Did he regenerate it? Or was it his subtle body that appeared after death? That's a mystery. That's a mystery we can contemplate. But for today, I ask you, as I ask myself, what life is urging you towards? What is life urging you towards? How can God become more through your exploration, through your specific adventures in consciousness? Because I feel like our adventures in consciousness are making God more in the infinite being that God is, right? I had a spiritual awakening in 1991, and it was so life-changing. It was so expanding for my consciousness that the old me before that was kind of like an ancient relic. It was kind of like this relic of who I am now. Do you all know what I mean? Do you ever kind of reflect on your early life and it feels like a past life? Anybody? It feels like it was so long ago. and who you are now is just this other thing that it almost feels like maybe it could be a couple lifetimes in the past, in the life we've lived so far. Matthew Fox gave a talk on resurrection, and he said to ask yourselves, is my curiosity alive? Is my gratitude alive? My mind, my imagination, my laughter and sense of humor, my creativity, my powers of generosity and compassion, my powers for continually generating and regenerating life. You know, how many times in your life has something happened that has shaken you out of being stuck, that has shaken you out of kind of an old patterning to wake up to a new frequency? Anybody have those? I hope so. You know, that reading that Diana read reminded me of when my mom died, you know, because when that happened, June 23rd, 2023, it shook me to my core. It really shook me to my core, and it opened me up to exploring things I had never explored. I'd never really been interested in exploring. And I gained all sorts of understanding that I hadn't known. And especially about traversing between the form and the formless. You know, that seeming realm, we call it the other side. But we can actually traverse that, and we can become skilled at traversing that, right? Yeah, so this being shaken can be such a catalyst. It actually can be like compost, is how Thich Nhat Hanh puts it. That's a nice word for it. It's fertilizer that can grow us and change us, that can really shift us out of old realities and old patterns and old paradigms. The other thing that Mom's passing really shook me out of was kind of that old conditioning of playing it safe, you know, and taking the safe route. Because soon after she passed, I let go of my job in Tahoe, and I had a couple of other options, job offers to be a minister and just to step into a position that was solid. And, you know, I knew there was going to be that monthly paycheck, and, you know, I could just step into the way they'd always done it there. But my heart was saying, no, you have to take this leap. You have to try something completely new. And you have to trust in that. And something was so shaken up in me that like this whole new template was forming of who I am and what's possible for this I am. And here we are. Here we are. Our second Easter Sunday. Yeah. So to take the leap and to trust the unknown, it's to be willing to be in that liminal space, that space where you've let something go, like say it's a place you moved out of, you know, or you've left a relationship, or you've left a job, or, you know, to be in that space where, you know, we let go of the old and we're comfortable with the unknown because the new is still forming. And we are staying open, and we're trusting, and we're letting that move in us so that we create in matter. And the density of matter can really take time. You know, the house I'm living in now, I love it so much every day. I say thank you so often. The one word that Meister Eckhart says to say if you pray. But I started visualizing that 2 years ago. So, you know, creating in matter can take some time sometimes, moving density. But it is this life in us, this intelligent consciousness in us, with the qualities of creativity and great love, that is ever saying, if we listen, rise up and explore and stretch and be courageous and resurrect the energy of inherent possibility in yourself. In my view, today's a day to forever take Jesus down off the cross. Can we all agree? To see that his life was about, and his teachings were about life, not death. They were about healing, not harming. They were about uplifting, not oppressing. And they were about our inherent divinity, not sinfulness, right? They were about our own evolutionary possibilities. He was the great example, you know, not the great exception. Charles Fillmore, who founded Unity, he would always say his favorite scripture was Christ in you, the hope of glory. Christ in you, the hope of glory. So what might Jesus have been pointing to when he said, you can do these things I've done and greater? You can do these things I have done and greater. What might he have been pointing to in your life, in your own life? You know, that we might live in more love, we might experience more peace, we might heal ourselves and others. We might help our country shift and our world shift out of the old paradigm of fear and domination and control into co-creating partnerships with each other. I remember when I was young, I think I was in my late teens, my great-grandmother Begum gave me a cross. A silver cross. Do you remember that cross, Stephen? She gave me the silver cross with Jesus on it. And it was very precious to me because she gave it to me, and it was something she loved and she'd had for a long time. It was very old, and it was silver. It was actually made out of silver. But it kind of disturbed me. I never liked that image of Jesus on the cross. I always liked the image of Jesus with the children around him, and Jesus, you know, sharing teachings, or Jesus with the light emanating from him in his ascended form. And it's funny, I never hung it on the wall, but I kept it, right? So I moved around with that cross, and one day I finally was unpacking it, and I went to hang it on the wall, and Jesus fell off the cross. Just fell off the cross. And like, it stunned me, and I went, ruh-roh, broke it. But then I thought, oh, that's so perfect, because it's always bothered me. And I was so happy. I loved it after that. And I put Jesus off the cross on my altar, And so and it's funny because around that time, I got the book, The Chalice and the Blade by Rian Eisler, who's going to be with us in 2 weeks. I think that she's a friend of yours, Jean, right? Well, it was when I read her book, The Chalice and the Blade, that I understood why intuitively my heart wanted Jesus off that cross. It's symbolic of a desire that we as humanity return to a way of being that is nonviolent, that is about giving and nurturing life versus domination through fear, control, and taking life. Dr. Eisler writes, Jesus' messages advocate for compassion, mutual responsibility, and the rejection of violence. And she talks about the Gnostic Gospels that were discovered in 1945, which really challenge the dominator view that we get in Orthodox, church. And that those texts affirm the significance of the women that were kind of written out and extricated, especially figures like Mary Magdalene. And they advocate for a direct access to the divine, that you don't need to go through a male hierarchy to reach the divine. So she describes how authoritarian regimes that suppress equality and partnership pose a significant threat to humanity's evolutionary progress. She says, quote, without a shift towards more inclusive and humane values, a totalitarian future remains a plausible outcome, one that could lead to global disaster. Prescient words. So I spoke last week, those of you that were online, about how a lot of folks that come to Unity and come to New Thought, they are recovering from kind of Christian dogma and a background where they didn't resonate with the focus on sin and the focus on guilt and shame and judgment, that they felt like took Jesus' message of love and contorted it with misunderstanding. And Rian talks about this, Rian Eisler. She writes that in Isaiah and Hosea, we read about a world with no more war and killing. A world with no more war and killing. And yet it's conflicting, because in Numbers 31 and Deuteronomy 20, we find divine commands to raise cities and kill every living being in them. So in her research as an archaeologist, and she'll tell us about this, I really can't wait to hear her talk, she found that there was a shift from a long history of partnership modeled in society where it was equality between men and women. It wasn't matriarchy or patriarchy, it was equality, the partnership model. And that there was a worship of the goddess, of nature, of that which gives life. That's the chalice. And that it was only around 4,500 years ago or so that the blade, and it was because they discovered metal, they started making swords and weapons, that became that shifted to a dominator model through war and through conquest. So she describes how the core of our major faiths and the values of our major faiths are empathy and nonviolence and sensitivity, and they're congruent with our human needs. But like what happened was a beautiful old picture was painted over, and those partnership teachings were taken over by a domination group of top-down control. So the Bible was written after the shift happened, and that worship of the goddess, the worship of God as mother, was written out. But we see it peeping through, don't we? We see it peeping through with Mother Mary and Mary Magdalene and the return of a lot of writings and the Gnostic Gospels. And I remember I went to see Mother Mira in Germany. Anybody seen Mother Mira? Just an incredibly wonderful presence of the Divine Mother that she embodies. And when I was staying in Germany, she was in this little town, Talheim, little town there. And I was in this other little village. Germany has all these neat little villages, and it's all this green grass, and you just walk over the hill and through the woods, and there's these chapels everywhere. And I would make a habit of going in the chapels. They were always open, and there were candles, and it was always a huge altar to Mother Mary. And so here I was, I would see Mother Mira, and then I would, be ecstatic, and then I'd go sit in these chapels and in front of, and you could light a candle, and I would just feel this incredible history of the worship of the divine feminine and the qualities that are equally important in men as women. Yeah, and so Rian Eisler makes the point that it is this needed reemergence of honoring the divine feminine aspects that are part of all of us, men and women, compassion, mercy, nurturing, connection, healing, that we need to value and express most if we want to thrive here on this planet, if we want to thrive. And of course, it spills over into how we treat the planet itself, doesn't it? It really does. If we value what's life-giving, then we preserve the forest, we preserve the old growth, we grow more food, we take care of our waters and our lakes, right? Earth Day is this Tuesday, but I think it should be every day. I'm going to go to Mount Shasta and walk around Lake Siskiyou, and I'm going to plant flowers. I'm going to plant lotuses. Every time I lift my foot, a lotus will bloom. I might even plant some trees. And I know many of you take time to celebrate and commune with nature. I see you in the park, so many of you. So I think it's really important, this communion with nature keeps us in touch with the mother aspect of God, that which is regenerating, that which is life-giving and sustaining and recreating. There's a poem, I'm not going to be able to read it as well as Anna, but there's a poem by Wendell Berry that it really captures the resurrecting energy of nature. I bet you all have heard this. It goes, "When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. And for a time, I rest in the grace of the world, and I am free." We need that rest, that restoration, that regeneration. The Franciscans called creation the first Bible. They called creation the first Bible, and of course it existed, 13.7 billion years before the second Bible was written. But in Romans 1:20, it kind of says this: "Ever since the creation of the world, her eternal power and divine nature, invisible though they are, have been understood and seen through the things she has made." I've been meditating on Jesus the last 2 weeks. And Joan came over and visited, and I told Joan, in fact, the day you came, I had really had this presence and this feeling and these tears of really feeling him and feeling the energy of the Christ consciousness. And I was just wondering, if he returned and everyone welcomed him, right? And he ran for president, and he was elected for president. What would he say? And how would he lead us? How would he lead our nation? How would he lead the world? How would he be a world leader? And so I just decided to write, to channel what he might say in his first speech. Would you like to hear it? It's long, speeches are kind of long, but. Okay, here goes. As your new president, my beloved co-creators with the I am that I am, as the leader of this precious United States of America, I am reducing my salary and the salary of those in Congress and using that money to take care of your family members and communities in need. You can clap. I am passing the World Peace Act of 2025, which allows all countries in the world to agree to nuclear disarmament and no war for 100 years. And we will use that money that's been keeping up all those weapons and nuclear sites to feed the hungry, house the unhoused, uplift the poor so that there will be poor no more. We're putting billions into education for all our public schools and teachers, and our learning centers will be havens of creativity and cutting-edge evolutionary arts with a focus on music and consciousness-expanding creativity. We're providing resources for teaching children mindfulness, meditation, empathy, and the skills of emotional intelligence and reconciliation. They will learn about the inclusive interfaith approach to spirituality and understand that they have a choice to believe whatever resonates with their hearts. We're putting millions into sustaining public land and national parks and creating new national parks all over the country to preserve nature for future generations. We're preserving all old-growth forests and protecting our lakes and rivers so clean water is accessible to all. We're converting to all clean energy and teaching our children how to grow food and care for this planet so that humanity lives sustainably for many generations to come. We're offering free training on the evolutionary model of the partnership way based on social equality, nonviolence, embracing diversity, and harmony with nature. We're supporting this country and all countries to adopt a holistic model of governing that supports freedom of religion and civil rights to benefit the common good. With our United States and united world, we will witness a glorious renaissance in humanity on this planet, ushering a golden age of peace on earth and goodwill to all beings. Finally, we hold with deep reverence the inherent divinity of every person as a children of the world, as we join with our world family to co-create unity and thrive together as never before on this planet. Thank you, friends, for entrusting me, Jesus, as your new president. Let love and peace prevail on earth, and so it is. Thank you. Oh, thank you so much. I poured my heart into that. When's he coming? Soon. He's coming soon in all of us. He's here. He's arising. Well, that's what I'm getting to. That's what my next thing I'm going to say is, we are the continuation body of Jesus. Just like Thich Nhat Hanh said that we are his continuation body when we live in mindfulness. We are the continuation body of Jesus. St. Teresa of Avila said it many, many hundreds of years ago. She said, Christ has no body now on earth but yours. No hands but yours, no feet but yours. You are the one to go about blessing people now. So may this unlimited consciousness continue to awaken and blossom in you as you create this day and every day your most inspired and magnificent life. Let us co-create the world we love. We can. Thank you all. Happy Easter. Thank you so much.